Me Liam, 32. Got a decent job as an engineer, mortgage on a house in the suburbs, the whole 9 yards. Married to Anna for what feels like a lifetime, but is actually just over 5 years. When we first met, things were easy. Effortless, even. We used to spend hours just talking about nothing, laughing until our sides hurt. Our first apartment was a tiny shoebox, but it felt like a palace because we were in it together. She'd make fun of the way I organized my books by color instead of author, and I'd tease her for leaving tea bags on every flat surface. It was the kind of comfortable silence and easy banter you see in movies and assume is fake. For a few years, it wasn't. Then, slowly, something shifted. It wasn't a big, dramatic event. There was no cheating, no massive fight. It was more like a slow leak, a quiet deflation. It probably started about a year ago, maybe a bit more. Conversations became shorter, more functional. Did you pick up the dry cleaning? The car needs gas. What do you want for dinner? The questions we used to ask, the ones about our dreams or fears or stupid thoughts we had during the day, just vanished. I tried to keep it going. I'd ask about her day at work, and she'd give me a one-word answer while scrolling on her phone. The phone became a third person in our marriage, a much more interesting person than me, apparently. The real deep freeze started in the bedroom. It went from a warm, connected part of our lives to a barren wasteland. At first, it was excuses. I'm too tired. I have a headache. I ate too much for dinner. I'm not a moron. I understood. Life gets in the way. People get tired. So I tried to take more off her plate. I'd cook dinner more often, handle the laundry, make sure the house was clean when she got home. I figured if she was less stressed, maybe things would get back to normal. They didn't. The excuses just got more creative. My attempts at affection started getting shut down in real time. I'd go to hug her on the couch while we were watching a movie, and she'd stiffen up, giving my shoulder a quick, awkward pat like I was a distant cousin. A kiss before leaving for work became a quick peck on the cheek, her head already turning away. I started to feel like a ghost in my own home. A provider, a handyman, a roommate, but not a husband. The rejection was constant, a low-grade humiliation that chipped away at me every single day. After a while, I stopped trying so much. You can only run into a brick wall so many times before you get a concussion. The silence in the house grew louder. Around this time, she got really close with a new friend from her yoga class. I never met her, but I heard her name constantly. All their conversations, which I'd overhear when Anna was on the phone, were about relationships. Specifically, what was wrong with men. They'd talk for hours about things like emotional labor and weaponized incompetence. Anna started using these terms. One day I loaded the dishwasher, and she came in behind me and reloaded it. She sighed dramatically and said she was tired of having to manage my mental load. I was just trying to help. Another time, I forgot to buy the specific brand of organic, gluten-free artisan crackers she liked. This was apparently an example of me not actively listening to her needs. Her social media feed also changed. It was all pop psychology infographics and relationship gurus talking about high-value women and how men need to step up. Everything was a test. Every interaction was a chance for me to fail. I tried to talk to her about it, genuinely. I sat her down one evening, I think it was a Sunday, and just laid it all out. Told her I felt disconnected, that I missed her, that I felt like I was failing but didn't know what the rules were. I asked her what she needed from me to feel close again. She looked at me with this detached, almost clinical expression. She said that she was glad I was finally ready to do the work. She told me that the spark doesn't just happen, it has to be earned. The conversation went nowhere. It was like talking to a corporate HR manager. A few weeks passed in this new, icy normal. I was just existing, going to work, coming home, eating dinner in near silence, going to bed. Then came the day of the list. It was a Tuesday night. I remember because I'd just finished fixing the leaky faucet under the sink that she'd been complaining about for a month. I was feeling pretty good about myself, like I'd actually accomplished something. She walked into the living room holding a piece of paper. She had that same serious, determined look on her face she had during our talk. "Liam," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth, "we need to discuss performance improvement." I thought she was joking. I let out a little laugh. She didn't even crack a smile. She sat down opposite me and placed the paper on the coffee table, smoothing it out with her hand. She slid it over to me. At the top, in a bold serif font, it read, "Relationship Proximity Protocol, a Framework for Intimacy." I swear to God, that's what it said. I picked it up. It was a bulleted list, divided into sections like a business proposal. Section 1 was titled Domestic Contributions. It listed a series of non-negotiable daily and weekly chores, stuff I was already doing for the most part, but now it was formalized. Daily, post-dinner kitchen sanitation, 100% completion required. Weekly, full bathroom cleaning, including grout. Section 2 was emotional engagement metrics. This was the real masterpiece. It required a minimum of 3 unique and validated compliments per day. It specified that compliments about physical appearance counted for less than compliments about her intellect or decisions. It also mandated 1 proactive emotional check-in per week, initiated by me, lasting no less than 30 minutes. Section 3, Romantic Investment Quotas. This part detailed the financial and planning requirements. 1 spontaneous gift every 2 weeks, with a minimum value stipulated. 1 fully planned date night per week, where all logistical and financial responsibility fell on me. And then, at the very bottom, was the final clause, the punchline. It was under a heading called Performance-Based Rewards. It stated that consistent fulfillment of all KPIs across all sections for a period of 7 consecutive days would unlock the potential for physical intimacy. It explicitly noted that failure to meet any single metric would result in a reset of the 7-day progression period. I read the whole thing twice. I looked up from the paper and stared at her. She was looking back at me, her expression a mixture of smugness and defiance. She honestly thought this was a brilliant, modern solution to our problems. She had gamified our marriage, turned our bed into a final boss level that could only be unlocked after completing a series of tedious side quests. Something inside me didn't just break, it turned to dust. All the frustration, the hurt, the confusion of the past year just evaporated, and it was replaced by a profound, crystal-clear calm. It was the kind of clarity you get right before a car crash. I saw the whole thing for what it was. This wasn't about fixing us. This was a power play, a contract designed to make me a permanent supplicant, forever dancing for the prize of basic human affection from my own wife. All my efforts, my attempts to understand, my willingness to change, it was all just seen as weakness to be exploited. I folded the paper neatly in half. I looked her right in the eye. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't even let the disappointment show on my face. I just nodded slowly. "Okay," I said. My voice was completely flat. "I understand. Thank you for providing clear guidelines. It's good to have a system." A triumphant little smile played on her lips. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd finally cracked the code, domesticated her lazy, emotionally unavailable husband. She had no idea what she'd actually done. She hadn't given me a roadmap back to her. She had given me an exit strategy. The very next morning, the new regime began. I became the perfect employee. I woke up early and made the coffee. While it was brewing, I unloaded the dishwasher. When she came into the kitchen, I looked up and delivered my first compliment of the day. "Anna, your ability to select a coffee mug is very efficient." She blinked, a little confused, but then smiled. "Oh, thanks." I got ready for work. Before I left, I found her in the living room. "That's an interesting color combination for your outfit today," I said, very bold. Compliment number 2. I didn't kiss her goodbye. I just gave a slight nod and walked out the door. Throughout the day, I set reminders on my phone. At lunch, I sent her a text. "I am acknowledging the hard work you do. It is duly noted." That counted as a compliment about her decisions, which was a bonus. When I got home, I immediately took out the trash. I cleaned the kitchen after dinner with the precision of a surgeon. Every surface wiped down, every crumb gone. "Kitchen sanitation complete," I announced to the empty room. She seemed pleased, smug even. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, basking in the glory of her master plan. She didn't notice that I hadn't asked her about her day. She didn't notice that I sat in the armchair across the room instead of on the couch next to her. She didn't notice that the house was filled with the sound of my compliance, but none of the warmth of my presence. The first few days were like this. I was a machine, a model employee executing a contract. I gave her compliments that were technically true but utterly devoid of emotion. "You have successfully navigated the television remote." "The way you parallel parked earlier was within acceptable tolerances." "This meal has an adequate level of sodium." She'd give me a weird look, but she couldn't complain. I was following the rules. Her rules. Friday was the mandatory date night. I made a reservation at one of those ridiculously expensive minimalist restaurants downtown, the kind of place where the portions are tiny and the bill is massive. I drove. I opened her door. I pulled out her chair. I did everything a good husband is supposed to do, but I was a robot. The waiter would come and I'd say, "Anna will be ordering first." She tried to start a conversation. She asked me about a project at work. "It's proceeding on schedule," I replied, taking a sip of water. She asked what I thought of a movie her friend had recommended. "I do not have sufficient data to form an opinion," I said. The silence between my robotic answers was vast and crushing. She spent most of the dinner looking uncomfortable, nervously checking her phone. I paid the bill without flinching, added a precise 20% tip, and we drove home in silence. When we got back, she stood in the hallway, looking at me expectantly. It was the end of the first week. By her own rules, I had fulfilled all my duties. I had checked every box. I knew what she was waiting for. She was waiting for me to collect my reward. I just looked at her. "All weekly objectives have been met," I said, my voice as neutral as a GPS navigator. "I am now going to read my book." I walked past her, went into the guest room, closed the door, and sat down to read. The look on her face was a mixture of utter shock and disbelief. It was the first crack in her victorious facade. She had designed a system to control me, but she had forgotten one crucial detail. The system dictated that intimacy was a potential reward. It wasn't mandatory. I had done the work. I had earned the prize, and I was choosing not to claim it. The second week was when things started to get weird. My cold, robotic compliance continued without a single deviation. I performed my chores with chilling efficiency. The bathrooms had never been cleaner. My compliments were delivered on schedule, as flat and uninspired as a corporate mission statement. "Anna, you have successfully operated the microwave. The throw pillows on the couch have been arranged in a geometrically pleasing manner." I was fulfilling my side of the contract perfectly, and it was driving her insane. She started trying to break the pattern. One evening, she put on a dress I used to love. She came into the living room and did a little twirl. "What do you think?" she asked, her voice a little too bright. I looked up from my laptop. "The dress is aesthetically pleasing," I said, my face impassive. "A fine choice for indoor lounging." I then returned my attention to my screen. Her smile faltered. She stood there for a moment, waiting for more, but nothing came. She was starting to understand that I was playing the game, but I wasn't playing to win her prize. I was playing to demonstrate the absurdity of the game itself. She began to initiate contact, the very thing she had withheld from me for so long. She'd accidentally brush her hand against mine when I passed her in the kitchen. I would just politely move my hand away, as if avoiding a piece of furniture. She tried to sit next to me on the couch. I simply stood up and said, "I need to go check the tire pressure on the car. It is a scheduled maintenance task." Every advance she made was met with a polite, logical, and soul-crushing wall of indifference. I was treating her exactly how she had treated me, like an inconvenience, an obstacle to be managed. The role reversal was complete. She was now the one seeking connection, and I was the one who was too tired, or not in the mood, except I never said those words. I just acted them. She started to get angry. "Why are you being like this, Liam?" She snapped one night after I delivered a particularly bland compliment about her choice of TV show. "I am operating within the parameters you established," I replied calmly, not looking away from the screen. "You're being a robot. You're doing it on purpose to mock me. I am merely fulfilling the terms of our agreement. The protocol does not specify the emotional tone required for completion of tasks." She couldn't argue with that. It was her own corporate-speak logic thrown back in her face. She stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door. I didn't flinch. I just kept watching my documentary about concrete manufacturing. A few days later, I met up with my best friend Jimmy. We've known each other since we were kids. He's a no-nonsense mechanic who can spot BS from a mile away. We were at a bar, just having a beer after work. He could tell something was off. I'm usually pretty talkative, but I was quiet. "All right, man, spill it," he said. "You look like your dog just died." I hesitated. Then I just decided to tell him everything. I pulled out my phone, where I'd taken a picture of the list. I handed it to him. He read it. His eyebrows shot up. He read it again, slower this time. A strange expression crossed his face. It was a mix of disbelief and pity. He handed the phone back to me and just stared into his beer for a solid minute. "Wow," he finally said, shaking his head. "Just wow." "Yeah," I said. "This isn't a plan to fix a marriage, Liam," he said, looking me dead in the eye. "This is an employee performance review. She's promoted you from husband to live-in intern." He took a long drink of his beer. "She's taken the one thing that's supposed to be about trust and connection and turned it into a transaction, like you're earning tokens at an arcade to trade in for a cheap stuffed animal." Hearing him say it out loud solidified everything for me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't the bad guy. "So what are you doing?" he asked. I told him about my malicious compliance, about the robotic compliments, the scheduled chores, the cold efficiency. A slow grin spread across his face. "Good," he said, nodding. "That's perfect. Don't yell, don't argue. Just show her what it feels like to live inside the stupid, loveless system she built. Let her choke on it." That conversation was a turning point. It wasn't just me being passive-aggressive anymore. It was me standing up for myself in the only way I had left. The third week was the beginning of the end. Anna's tactics changed from frustration to desperation. She tried to apologize, but in a roundabout way. "Maybe the list was a little rigid," she'd say. "It provides excellent structure," I'd reply. She tried to appeal to our history. She brought out an old photo album and started talking about our first vacation together. I looked at the pictures without expression. "Yes," I said, "that was a successful deployment of leisure time. The budget was well managed." She was trying to find a crack in my armor, a hint of the old me. But the old me was gone. He had died the night he read that list. The house felt like a pressure cooker. The air was thick with unspoken words and her simmering resentment. She stopped going out with her friend. She stopped spending hours on her phone. All her energy was now focused on me, on trying to get a reaction, any reaction. She started crying, a lot. Sometimes it would be quiet sniffles on the couch. Other times it would be full-blown sobs in the bedroom. I would simply observe it. I have detected an audio-visual expression of sadness, I might say. Do you require a tissue? It sounds cruel, I know, but my empathy had been hollowed out. She had treated my emotions as an inconvenience for so long that I had simply turned them off. She was experiencing the loneliness I had felt for the better part of a year, the feeling of being completely alone while another person is sitting right next to you. The irony was suffocating. She had created a list to force me to be closer to her, and in doing so, she had pushed me away forever. The final confrontation happened on a Saturday night, almost a month after the list was introduced. I had just finished my weekly emotional check-in, which consisted of me asking her a series of questions from a business management website about team morale. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your current level of satisfaction with our domestic synergy? She just stared at me, her eyes red from crying. She didn't answer. I made a note on a pad. Respondent declined to answer. This concludes the scheduled check-in, I said, standing up to leave. She completely lost it. Stop it, she screamed, jumping up from the couch. Just stop it, Liam. Stop talking like that. Stop acting like this. I turned to face her. My expression didn't change. I am acting in accordance with the protocol, I said. Damn the protocol, she yelled, tears streaming down her face. I hate the protocol. I hate the list. I just want my husband back. I stood there in silence for a moment, letting her words hang in the air. Your husband? I finally said. And for the first time in weeks, a hint of my real voice came through. It was quiet and cold as ice. You didn't want a husband, Anna. You wanted an employee. You wanted a subordinate to manage. I took a step toward her. She flinched. A husband is a partner, a teammate. You don't hand your teammate a list of demands and tell him to earn your affection. You don't turn love into a performance bonus. She started to speak, to make an excuse, but I kept going. For over a year I tried. I tried to talk, to help, to connect, and you met me with silence, with excuses, and with contempt. You made me feel like a stranger in my own home. My touch was a nuisance to you. I just wanted you to try harder, she sobbed. Try harder at what? At reading your mind? I did everything a man is supposed to do. I worked hard. I was faithful. I helped around the house. But it wasn't enough, because what you wanted wasn't a partner. You wanted a mind reader, a servant who would anticipate your every need without you having to communicate. And when I failed at that impossible task, you decided to punish me. I walked over to the desk where the original list was still sitting, a monument to her hubris. I picked it up. This, I said, holding it up, this wasn't a cry for help. This was a declaration of war on our marriage. You turned intimacy into a weapon and respect into a commodity. You thought you could control me with it. I looked her right in the eye. You wanted to know why I don't touch you anymore? Because you've made it clear that my touch isn't something you desire. It's something you award for good behavior. And I'm not a dog, Anna. I don't do tricks for treats. I tore the list in half, and then in half again, and again, until it was just a pile of confetti in my hands. I let the pieces fall to the floor. The game is over, I said quietly. I went into the guest room and packed a bag. She just stood there in the living room, surrounded by the scraps of her failed contract, sobbing. I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel sad anymore. I just felt empty. I spent that night at Jimmy's place. The next day, I went back to the house to get the rest of my things. She was there. She had been crying all night. She begged. She pleaded. She said she was sorry. She said she'd made a horrible mistake, and I believe she was sorry. But she wasn't sorry for how she felt. She was sorry she got caught. She was sorry her plan had backfired so spectacularly. "It's too late, Anna," I told her. "You can't unring a bell. You showed me exactly how you see me. Not as your partner, but as a project to be managed, a resource to be optimized. I'll never be able to unsee that." So that's where we are now. I'm living in a small apartment across town. We're getting a divorce. It's quiet. It's lonely sometimes. But it's a clean, honest loneliness. It's not the soul-crushing loneliness of lying next to someone who sees you as a checklist. She destroyed what we had because she listened to toxic people and believed that a relationship is a power struggle, not a partnership. She wanted to play a game of control. She just didn't realize that sometimes the only winning move is not to play.